Kezia Dugdale's decision to stand down as leader of the Scottish Labour Party has fuelled speculation that the upcoming contest to elect her replacement will be a fight for the political heart and soul. The political editor of the Daily Record, David Clegg, predicts a battle is brewing.
It would be wrong to suggest that Kezia Dugdale's departure is because of the splits in the Labour Party. It's quite easy to suggest that she's a moderate and she was forced out by Corbynistas. I don't think that's the case. But it's certainly going to be a consequence of her departure that the Scottish Labour leader position becomes the site of a turf war between more moderate forces and supporters in Scotland of Jeremy Corbyn.
Kezia Dugdale took on the leadership after the party's virtual implosion in the 2015 general election. On her watch, the Scottish contingent at Westminster rose from 1 solitary MP to 7. Among them, Paul Sweeney, who was elected to represent Glasgow North East. He's here with us in the studio now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Was your victory and that of your colleagues vindication of Kezia Dugdale's positioning of Scottish Labour?
I think in large part it was. I mean, it was a combined effort, really. One which was a UK-wide message, which cut through the for the many, not the few, messaging that was about a radical socialist programme for redistribution of wealth and power and influence in the UK in favour of working people.
You couldn't call Kezia Dugdale a radical socialist, could you?
Well, I think in many ways you could. I mean, look back at the manifesto in 2016. It was the most radical manifesto that's ever been presented to the Scottish electorate for a Scottish Parliament election in terms of redistribution of wealth.
And Labour ended up in third position after that election.
Well, I think that was the nature of the debate in Scotland at that time. It had been sort of fixed in a sort of entrenched position about the constitutional future of the country. And what we saw
that was the campaign that Kezia Dugdale ran in this general election as well, wasn't it, saying no to Indy Ref 2?
I don't think it's an extreme. You know, on one hand, you have to make that position on the Constitution clear, but what crucially was the difference this time was a national vision beyond the constitutional picture, which addressed social justice issues, and that was a key difference because the SNP in this case found themselves completely kind of displaced by that argument because they didn't really have anything convincing to offer. So that's why they became sort of beige and on the fringes of that debate in the election, and that's why Labour was able to get the cut through it did. And I think balancing the sort of clarity of Labour's constitutional position with our radical socialist message really got the cut through that we maybe lacked in 2016.
Well, the SNP, of course, still came out of that election with 35 seats. But in terms of Labour's position going forward, is it time to abandon the focus on the Constitution and talk about other things?
I think it's a difficult balance to strike, actually. I think Labour's emphasis much more needs to be focused on the radical socialist vision that we have for the country, because I think that's where the electorate wants to be. I think people, to be honest, are kind of scunnered with the constant, endless obsession with the Constitution. I think it's quite clear that Labour has to have a very firm view on that and a very positive view on it, particularly around federalism and the future that might offer the UK and a more stable and sustainable future for the UK Constitution. I think we need to be focused much more on the real politics issues, which is actually not maybe what cupboard the policy tins are kept in, but actually what we're doing to take the tins out of the cupboard and open them up and put them into a pan and actually get cooking with them and serving up some decent radical socialist policies that will deliver for the country.
But what's your evidence that actually Scotland wants a radical socialist solution?
Well, I think that's demonstrated by the direction of travel that we've seen. The difference at the start of the campaign versus what happened on election night with Scottish Labour, the change in direction. I think that plays out that there's actually a momentum behind the messaging we have in Scotland.
Would you argue then that it's time for a radical socialist leader of the Scottish Labour Party?
Well, I think what we're looking for is someone who will emphasise our policy positions in lockstep with the manifesto that we had in the general election. I think that's clear that it captured the imagination of people, particularly in I was campaigning in Glasgow North East. I saw that change play out, you know, an area like Denniston, for example, which was very firmly yes, and then very firmly SNP in 2015, and Green as well in the council elections, very, very strongly came out in favour of the Labour Party, and particularly young people. Somebody needs to be able to credibly communicate with those young people and get them behind the Labour movement and show them that there's an exciting future in the Labour Party.
Is that someone then, Anas Sarwar? He's possibly got the highest profile of all the potential candidates here. But of course, previously, he has been critical of Jeremy Corbyn and called for him to stand down.
Well, I think many people in the Labour Party, I think even some of Jeremy's natural political allies would admit they had scepticism about Jeremy's capacity to lead effectively. Coming from the backbenches with no previous ministerial experience or frontbench experience, I think there was all sorts of questions about whether Jeremy could really rise to the occasion and pull it off. But I think he's done it with aplomb in their last election campaign. I think any initial scepticism amongst other members of the Labour Party has been put to bed, and everyone's very much behind Jeremy's leadership and his message for the country.
Thanks for coming in to speak to us this morning. That's Paul Sweeney. He is the Labour MP for Glasgow North East.